the dysfunction just goes from one generation to the next if it's not stopped in its tracks or there's no awareness, and then it just continues. So hopefully bringing the awareness by having some of these discussions and the podcast, it can help to, maybe intercept some of this and get people the help that they need and the awareness so they can do the work.
Hi, my name's Lawrence Joss, and welcome to the Family Disappeared podcast. Welcome to our second season, and for this season, we're going to be having a co-host. Gio, can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Gio. Short for Georgette, but yeah, I've been on a couple of podcasts, and the energy here is awesome. You're going to pick up a lot of great tools and hear some great ideas and maybe have a little fun.
Thank you, Georgette. It's so great to have you in the co-pilot seat with me this season, and both of us don't know what's going to happen. So anyone out there that's listening, we're going to see what happens, and I think with a co-host and another energy on these kind of recordings, it's going to add a lot to it. And we're going to be talking about this season and what's going to be coming up, the people we're going to be interviewing, the topics we're going to be talking about. There's some really wonderful, exciting stuff, and some really prominent folks that are going to be on interviews. We got Josh Coleman coming up. We have Karen Woodall. We have Amy Baker, and a bunch of other folks. And we've got one of those in the can already, so hopefully everyone else will show up for the recordings, and what I'm telling you will not be inaccurate. And also on this episode, we're going to talk about a bunch of the comments we're getting from you out there. We're going to talk about some of the communities that we haven't necessarily represented in the most useful way. There's a lot of young folks out there that are responding in comments and saying, hey, like, why aren't we represented? My point of view is real too. And yes, 100% it is. And this season, we're going to have some previously alienated children that are young adults or adults now on the show, and we're going to be sharing many, many more perspectives on that. So please keep sending your information, your requests, calling us in, calling us out. Let us know what we're missing. We also want to have more diversity on the show. So clearly, we want to welcome anyone out there from the BIPOC community that wants to get involved, co-hosting, being on the show, being interviewed. We want to make sure that there's diversity, inclusion, and equity on the show. And at this particular moment, there is not that much. You know what I mean? And it's definitely a downfall on our side. And also the LGBTQ community. We want to have those point of views represented too, because right now we're definitely representing a more of a heteronormative point of view. So everyone's welcome. Make sure to like the show, share, subscribe. You can email familydisappeared@gmail.com. Share your thoughts, suggestions. Let us know what else we're missing. This is a community-based show, so we need your input. And that's it. Let's jump into the show.
I just kind of would like to share a little bit about my journey with parental alienation and how I got into the 12-step program with PAA. So I actually discovered the organization a year before I even attempted showing up at a meeting. And when I did, I learned real quickly that in order to absorb the most amount of information and healing in my life is I had to become an integral part of the group. And so that's where something called service came in for me. So one of the things I do for service is I decided to be a part of the podcast that was created. And I was very interested in putting myself in a very uncomfortable place for most of my life. And through the alienation, I had very little to no confidence. I was scared. I operated in just the mode of fear. And when I started doing some interviewing on the podcast and talking with other members of the fellowship during that process, it helped to solidify this new strength I was gaining in myself and having a little bit of confidence. So the podcasts were an open door for me to voice what I had going on. I can give some light and some opinion and be a beacon to others in the world who are walking through this stuff.
Oh, that's awesome, Gio. So everyone, let's jump into the show and see what we got going on today. So Gio, your first co-hosting, like what was it? What happened this morning? How did you feel when you woke up? Was there a party going on?
There was a little bit of a party. So, this, knowing that I was walking into this for the last couple of weeks, there was clearly some uncomfortable feelings um, that I knew were coming. Uh, However, with some of the new experiences I've had, um, it, I recognized that I was feeling nervous, but it was um, welcomed because I feel that I want to have that little bit of an edge of being curious and a little bit afraid. It's a great test for me to, put on this belt of courage and walk into these uncomfortable situations. So yeah, I was in a bit of a sweat, but I did a little physical activity and kind of like pushed that right out.
Oh, I like that. The bit of a sweat, that little anxiety and emotions and all that stuff bubbling up. I can totally relate to that.
All right, so we're going to hit some of these questions today. So, Lawrence, I got a question for you. So, we've been talking about, some of the people we've been representing in these podcasts. So, why do you think that marginalized communities are not wholly represented on the podcast right now?
You know, this question is from someone out in the community in the audience, and it's a really great question. And most spaces that I go where I'm hearing people talking about parental alienation, it's very white presenting, and it is concerning because there's a huge difference in gender, in race, in ethnicity, and so many different things, and this is pervasive throughout the world. So I think, why do I think the marginalized communities aren't represented? I think we need to make more of an effort as a community and an organization to welcome people in and make the space more comfortable for them. And we're in the learning process, so we're trying to do that and not necessarily doing a great job. But I think it's important to answer these questions and open up the communication and also say, hey, welcome, come take a seat. Like, we have a platform and we want to use the platform also to hear voices of the whole community. So if you're interested and you have a voice and you don't have a platform because you are coming out of a marginalized community, please contact us, please contact me, I will contact you right back. And as long as we're in like a recovery based conversation, whether it's about program, whether it's about your story, whether it's about anything else, like, we want you on the show. You know, it's really important to have you on the show.
Yeah, that's great. I hear what you're saying with that, Lawrence. I also think, the awareness, the fellowship itself has been around for about 2.5 years, and I feel that, we're just getting some steam behind this, and I think as the awareness continues to blossom as it has, I think it will be easier to start pulling in some of the um, the group at large uh, that's out there of all different walks, all different situations, and those people will probably start to slowly show up more in from those diverse areas. I feel as we keep putting the word out there too.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hearing you saying, like, over time you're feeling that more diversity will enter the group, and I got a little bit different take. Like, there's a lot of privilege in the group. There's a people that have computers and access to internet and extra resources, so they're able to attend meetings and stuff like that. And this is across all platforms, not just our community, but all platforms that are really, fighting for folks and for families. So I think as a community, as an organization, and as a worldwide conversation, like, we need to step up and create resources, or part of our resources to bring communities in that don't have access, and we actually have to figure out how to make that available to them. I don't think that it's slower for other communities to get in. I just think the people that have privilege and access to resources got in sooner, and that's not what this is about. Like, this is about the whole community, and it's such an important conversation, and nothing that we've tapped into yet. And it's also part of the systemic problem in the courts and everything like that. Like the people in the middle class that have money that fight this are one group of people that are being represented, and then people that are socially, economically challenged, they don't even get to fight. They're just paying stuff. They're just letting go because there's nothing to fight for. So I'm really passionate about this and learning about this and making mistakes even as we're talking about it. But not but and we want to figure out how to make the community as inclusive as possible.
Absolutely.
So we're just going to pop through a bunch of different questions here, and we're going to be addressing all of these things on the season, and hopefully bringing in all these different communities that we're discussing, because we have people lined up already. But we want everyone's voice to be heard. We're going to have sections on the podcast where you can share a recovery story. You can share something that's maybe just an experience of yours that might be different than some of the other experiences that are out there. So you need to let us know that you'd like to do that. And there's a podcast crew down in the show notes. You can click on that and send information that way. You can send an email directly to me, again, at familydisappeared@gmail.com. So I'm going to jump into the next question for you, Gio. So there's a lot of young adults and adults that are listening and watching some of the content that we're making, and they're having some really negative responses. They're like, "Hey, my parents not a good person. They're bad. Like, you can't accept unacceptable behavior." And there's definitely some stuff coming up from them. Like, what comes up for you when I say, like, how do we represent those kids, and what's your take on it?
We need to recognize that they are also part of the suffering. I know we talk about parental alienation and what we are going through as parents, in our lives and walking through this. Um, but we we don't have an opportunity to. We don't have some of these kids sitting in the rooms with us, or um, uh, there's not an opportunity for us to get when we gather to listen to what our children are experiencing and what they are walking through. There is a great deal of trauma that needs acknowledging, not only in the parents but in the kids, and they too, they need someone to just sit with them emotionally. They themselves, they aren't maybe aware of the emotions that they're sitting with, the and they need to be brought into appropriate discussion and acknowledgement as to uh you know what pain are they going through. And um do we want to get these kids to open up as well and affirm that openness and get out the emotions that they're going through and make it very safe and comfortable for them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely finding a safe place for them to get to go through their process and get into some recovery too, and be able to move through some of the emotions just like us. And I will say, for me, for anyone that's a young adult, an adult, or anyone that's struggling with any of these dynamics in the opposite direction as a parent, so from a child up, like, your feelings are real. Your experience is valid. And just because I have a different experience doesn't invalidate your experience. Like parental alienation or any of this trauma wants us to have black and white thinking. But it's both and. Like, we can both be sitting at the same table and have two different experiences, and they're both real. And if you're angry at me and you're my child, yeah, you have every right to be angry at me. I do stuff that's upsetting and not appropriate sometimes, and yeah, it's real and it's true, and I will acknowledge that, and I don't need to defend that because your feelings are real. So I just want to say that, like, those feelings are real, and we have some interviews coming up with some young adults and adults that are really fascinating. One in particular, George, I don't know if I told you about this one, but we have a gentleman from Turkey that's on an interview, and culturally his parents didn't separate, so he was raised in a family where he was a conduit for his mother's anger and frustration directed at his father, and so he lived with parental alienation in the house where it didn't fall apart. And I want to say this, like, this and I want to say that this podcast seems like it's made for people that are on the extreme edges of the bell curve, that are in really traumatic situations with parental alienation, estrangement, erasure, disconnection, whatever it is. But the whole bell curve, everyone in the middle, if you're out there in families, great, and everything like that, that's wonderful. And some of these dynamics still coexist in families because, families are dysfunctional.
Yes, they are. And when the dysfunction just goes from one generation to the next if it's not uh, stopped in its tracks or there's no awareness. And then it just continues. So hopefully, for if bringing the awareness by having some of these discussions and the podcast, it can help to, maybe intercept some of this and get people the help that they need and the awareness so they can do the work.
Yes, no, 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 I agree.
All right. So we have a comment from our audience. So young adults that do not talk to their parents are plain wrong. We need to acknowledge that it's wrong, or we just acquiescing to the negative behavior and saying it's okay. So Lawrence, what do you think about that comment?
So this is a really powerful comment that someone took the time to share, and it sounds like there's a lot of pain there, and I felt that pain too, and frustration, and even possibly anger. And yeah, some of the behavior might seem really wrong and really hurtful. And when I feel that way, it's really coming from my perspective and my lived life. You know what I mean? And I reacted from a lot of times from that place, and I created a lot more harm. And when I take a step back and I just say, "Hey, what's going on for my child right now? What are they feeling?" and kind of take more of an MVC approach, which is nonviolent communication that we've spoken about in the past and that we're going to have foundational trainings on. I start to put myself in their chair, and when they're saying, "Yeah, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to do anything," from that, they're actually telling me that they're really hurt and that they're feeling dysregulated, and they're just trying to survive. So I totally get how that sounds totally wrong and not okay. And in some instances, it most probably is not. But for me, I think if I'm doing my work and my kids are in a lot of pain and they're lashing out in that way, or they're expressing their lived reality, which is real, in that way, then I don't need to react in that form. And me saying that the negative behavior is okay is not me agreeing with the negative behavior, but it's actually acknowledging that it's real, and I don't need to agree with it, but I don't have to argue about it either. I can go talk to my partner, I can go talk to a friend, I can go to a meeting, I can go somewhere else to have this discussion. It's not a discussion that I think that I would need to have with my child if I'm regulated. What about you, Gio?
I'm listening to you, and I'll have to be honest. This I struggled with my children because of my lived experience. I was terrified. I didn't know what to say. So um, I would have been the parent who did not say anything, and I feel a little guilty that maybe because of my lack of tools or knowledge, that uh, because I was afraid of my kids, I was afraid to actually do what would be referred to as maybe parenting them and letting them know from my perspective as a parent, this is uh it's not okay. And then when I hear you speaking, it also reminds me that I um the things that I have learned, that I need to be curious and pause, and I have more awareness now to because I'm finding I'm doing it now with my two older kids being estranged from me for the last 16 months. I am stepping back and looking at uh, my contributions to the cycle of these things and my sensitivity or lack thereof, maybe.
I love that you have a different perspective, Gio, and I think that's a wonderful, needed thing on the show. And as you're saying that you have a different perspective, I see my shadow. So if people don't know what shadow work is kind of like that stuff that's hidden in the back of your brain or the tips of your toes that you don't really touch. And then when someone else joins the conversation, you're like, oh, me too. So I'd like to say me too. There was a lot of times that I didn't parent in the appropriate manner because I was scared, because I thought stuff would just resolve itself, and if I just took the high road and did that kind of stuff, that everything would be okay. And I have regret, and I'm hearing you say that you have regret. You would have liked to step up or shown up maybe in a little bit different way in some of those circumstances.
Absolutely, I wish I would have been able to show up different. And because of again, I'm going to go back to the recovery work that I've been doing for the last 23 months. Had I not gone through the alienation, I know it sounds strange, as hard as the alienation and the separation from my kids and all this turmoil, I would not have had an opportunity to call attention to change I needed in my life. Um, I've also been able to work through a lot of the blame, the shame, and the guilt I've lived with for my entire life. And I am reclaiming myself and giving myself opportunity to show up different in my life, and not just with my kids. I mean, I'm excited for the day where hopefully, if they choose to come and meet me again and see and enjoy the adventure of getting to know their mom in a different way, it's totally worth it. The work has been worth it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a fascinating nuance you brought up, that idea of what if, what could I have done, when could I have done it if I just would have done this. Like, I know there's so much regret for so many of us, and there's no manual here. Like, I worked through a lot of the shame because I did the best that I could with what I had, and I continue to do the work, and I continue to evolve and change as a man and as a parent. But just you bringing up that shadow stuff, I feel emotion coming up. I feel like tears coming into my eyes. Like, I feel like all the stuff that we shove down, or not we, I shove down. Like, yeah, there's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of regret. There's a lot of longing to have parented differently. And I will say this too: I need another 5 or 10 years to see if what I did was the best that I could do and appropriate and useful, because I don't know. It's a really slow process.
Yeah. I sometimes when I think about my kids, I'm hoping that they're taking the opportunity to, peel back the layers and make discoveries in their life, or even and mostly heal themselves, so they have the ability to maybe, look at me in a different light, uh, um, with with where I came from, if they're curious enough to want to do that. So, um, yeah, there's a lot of beauty out of the ashes of this. So I choose to keep pushing through.
Yeah, and I think that gives us a great topic for another show, is really talking about some of that shame and some of that regret, and the what ifs, and hear some different people's perspectives on what's come up for them. And yeah, and hopefully get some parents that have been reunified to talk about like the what ifs, and what was the transition point. Did the what ifs change once you got a relationship back? Did they stay? Did they? I don't
I don't know.
know.
I have to think.
We're gonna agree on that one. We both don't know. I like
We
that.
got that one.
I'm going to throw in a couple different ideas here, and you pick out something that you want to talk about, because these are different ideas that people have thrown out in some questions and comments, and we're all getting closer to wrapping up the show. But family of choice, healthy mirroring, and the idea of, in those circumstances, that it's great to be seen, but there's no need to be agreed with. You know what I mean? Like, this idea that we got to get everyone to agree with us for it to be okay. Like, are you okay with just someone acknowledging your reality, and is that enough now?
I would have to say, for me, I've learned that it is enough, because I spent so many years uh, telling and retelling, uh, taking anybody that would listen and like, this is really what happened. This is what's going on in my life now. If you can just remember this, and anybody else you talk to in this small town, just let them know that I didn't do it like that, or you know what I'm saying. And so in the past, my story was my story, and you were going to listen to it, and I was going to take you hostage and make you believe that the story went this way. And the fact of the matter is this is my life. This is my, uh, this is my lived experience, and you I don't feel that I need to convince anybody to believe my story or that they have to be on the Geo bus. It is my experience, what I have inside of me. And I'm the only one that knows what that looked like, what it felt like. And unless you have the ability to slide yourself into my slippers and walk around a little bit and feel that, you're really not going to get what that experience was for me anyway. But it has taken me years to just be like, this is what I'm sitting with. And I don't need to convince anybody of that.
Yeah, it's funny when you use the word hostage. I was a great hostage taker. I wanted everyone to listen to my story. I wanted them to side with me. I wanted them to make me feel better. And what I've come to learn, I just wanted them to regulate my nervous system. Like I wanted something outside of me to make me feel better. So I had this really funny experience. It was my high school reunion, 20-year high school reunion. I was a couple years into parental alienation, had no idea what it was. And I went out to dinner with 6 or 7 or 8 people from high school. And I was telling them about my ex and these things that was going on. And at this time, my oldest daughter wasn't talking to me. And I was telling them all this stuff. And it was like, ah, like save me, love me, do something. And it wasn't until like a year or two later that I remembered the situation, and everyone had like a really strange look on their face. They're like, leave me alone. You know what I mean? Like like it was just such a funny thing to look back on and how desperate I was for someone to just listen to me and acknowledge that what was happening was wrong. And I just wanted someone to just rub my back.
Or your feet. Yeah. I
Oh, my
just,
feet. Yes, feet would be much better, actually.
She would be good for me. And it's just and I used to have such a crazy energy about that too. Um and I understand where that came from, at least for me, as I'm doing all this work with the alienation bit, it opens up these great little doors to the rest of who you are. And how did I get to, like, where did my thinking come from? And um yeah, my past was, as a child, nobody listened to me. Everybody shushed me or just didn't listen. So even more so, I'm going to say that contributed to me wanting to people to tell people my story. Like, somebody listen, please, just listen to me. That's not how it went. So I feel one of the little geo nesting dolls that's where she was doing her speaking. Like, somebody help me.
I got those Russian dolls in my head that like open up to like the different
That's
sizes,
the
and that
ones.
they right, they get to that little tiny Geo. Yeah, listen to me.
Okay, so we've been hanging out here for a while, getting ready to finish up. Question I got for you, Lawrence, is so what is your favorite recovery story?
Ooh, that's cool. I got a couple, but so I was new to recovery, not PAA. I got sober like 17 years ago when my oldest daughter wasn't talking to me. Like all parental alienation, estrangement, erasure, all that stuff was happening, and my life was falling apart. And I went and joined a 12-step meeting, and none of my friends were like really connected to me because they were all couple friends. And it was one of my kids' birthday parties, and I'd gotten a sponsor really early on in the program, and a sponsor is someone that helps take you through the steps. And I invited him to my kid's birthday party. So it was going to be me, my sponsor, his wife, and their child, and a couple of other people I knew. So my sponsor gets to the bowling alley because we were at the bowling alley. And then a couple minutes later, his sponsor shows up with two of his kids. And then a couple minutes later, his sponsor shows up with his kids. So I invite one person, their spouse, and a child, and I get like 25 people from communities showing up. And for me, like that was like such an incredible learning moment about love, about just people that are struggling together with something similar, and everyone just shows up to support each other for fun and for free. So that is by far one of the most influential moments in my recovery. And what about you, Gio? Do you have something really fun from recovery you want to share?
Well, I do. And your story was awesome. I mean, when you're telling a story, I'm like getting this picture of these people showing up at this fun party and how exciting. And I actually, mine is kind of a fun situation like that too. So my very favorite is the trip that I was allowed to take, not allowed, that I've never gone on an adventure on my own. And I took a trip to visit some of the members of my fellowship in a beautiful space, and I discovered the art of ecstatic dance. And so, and so with these three people, amazing people, we were brought to a an event where um, we were came in to just freely dance, and we had someone spinning music. And when I walked into this huge room, there were just so many people just free from themselves, free from any sort of organized movement. So people would come into the room and just express themselves through dance, and that rocked my world. That felt like uh, just a huge release of energy I didn't even know I had in me. And it was so beautiful because it pushed the limits. And that felt like recovery in action. And to be able to express your emotions and your feelings through body movement like that was the coolest thing I've ever done, or one of the coolest things. But yeah, that was a huge recovery fun time. So
Oh my God, it's so nice to see your face light up and your smile and your voice and the tones and just all the energy around that. And to break my anonymity, I was on the trip with Geo too, and there were
yes,
several
you
of us,
were.
and I took them to Ecstatic Dance, and Ecstatic Dance, if you haven't tried it out, or Five Rhythms, you can check it out. It's just a free form flow of dancing where you move and you do anything that you want to do, and everything's accepted and welcome. Or you can just sit on the floor too. It's a really cool place, but and like that is the epitome of recovery where you just show up.
It was. It was just, just being the freakiest express. I didn't know I had that in me even. And I went to a place of discovery that I mean, that's untapped geo-ness. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, yeah, and if you're listening to us giggle and laugh, like people in the community are getting together all over the world and all over the country, and they're having moments like these every single day. And the beauty about community and 12-step program and all the other different doors that we're opening up is we get to meet people we would never have met, and we have a common language and a common bond, and we go and have some adventures together. So, come join the party if that's interesting for you. Whoa, Gio. That was so fun. What a hoot having you on the show, and I'm looking forward to when we get to co-host again together.
Oh my, it's gonna be great. Good energy.
Totally. So our next couple of episodes are going to be with Dr. Josh Coleman, and we're talking about writing an amends letter. What that looks like, what it feels like in your body. Is it for you? Is it for your child? Is it cathartic? What are the results? What are some of the resources he has? And he has some really great stuff for you, free resources and guides, and he does webinars, and there's all kinds of neat stuff. So I would say don't miss it. Like writing that amends letter, when I did that, was incredibly, incredibly cathartic. And then after that we have an adult child talking about his experience through coming to the community, and also just finding out in his 40s that he was alienated, and working through that grief and trauma, and what that looks like for him. And then we have the gentleman coming in out of Turkey. We have a wonderful interview with Sarah Payton, who's out of the NVC community. She's a trainer, but she also does something called family constellations, and she also does a lot of work around neuroscience. So we're going to connect the intersection of all those and how they relate to family systems, and so many more exciting things. So, Gio, I'm going to let you say goodbye, and then I'm going to wrap up when you're done, and we'll let everyone go about their day.
Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity to address anyone out there. This is really a beautiful space to do some incredible work, to open up some discovery for yourself and some healing. And, I'm sure there's people that we meet in our life that are also going through the same thing. So share this stuff, talk about it, hop on the podcast and get the word out there. There's help and there's hope and there's healing for your life. So, yeah, this was great, Lawrence. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Gio. And again, in the show notes is going to be a link to PAA, which is the 12-step fellowship Parental Alienation Anonymous. Click on it, drop by a meeting, see if you like it, see if you don't like it. And there's other communities out there that support families and parents and adults and children too. And if you're an adult child or a young adult child and you're alienated, we're going to be starting meetings specifically for that community in January. So stay tuned for the launch date of that stuff. There's the Family Hope Project in the show notes, which is a virtual art gallery where you get to share your art just as an expression of who you are, where you are, what you're struggling with, and what's happening in your life. There's the podcast crew join us. And again, family disappeared at gmail.com. Send me a message, send Gio a message. Either one of us that you're engaging will respond to you. You know, we'd love to hear from you, and make sure to like and share, like Gio said, and subscribe wherever you can. And I know it seems silly, but it's really important because the more energy we generate, the more people the stuff gets shared with, the more communities, families, people, and hopefully a difference we can make. So I'd like to say thank you for coming for the journey today. And if no one's told you yet today, I love you.
I love you. I love you too, Lawrence.
I love you, Gio, and I love the whole community, but I love you too, Gio.
Yes.
So, yes,
Yes.
thank you, everyone. Have a good one.